The rusted cabinet sat exactly where it had always been, bolted to the concrete floor of the basement workshop like a monument to her father's obsessions. Elena Ruiz hadn't wanted to come back to this house, hadn't wanted to stand in this musty space that smelled of motor oil and disappointment and decades of her father's failed promises. But the eviction notice gave her 72 hours, and the storage unit she'd been living in with Mia didn't allow children after 9 p.m. So here she stood at 34 years old, a single mother with $487 in her checking account, staring at the last remnant of Rafael Ruiz's life and wondering if anything he'd left behind was worth keeping. The cabinet was massive, 6 feet tall, 4 feet wide. Industrial steel painted a dull green that had oxidized to brown in patches where rust had claimed territory. Her father had bought it at a government surplus auction in 1987, the same year Elena was born. She remembered him dragging it down the basement steps with 2 friends from the factory, remembered the screech of metal on concrete, remembered her mother screaming that he'd wasted grocery money on junk again. "Mama, what's that smell?" Mia's voice drifted down the basement stairs. 8 years old and already learning to navigate the architecture of poverty, understanding that basements meant cheap housing, that smell meant mold, that silence from her mother meant worry too heavy for words. "Just old tools, baby. Stay upstairs, okay? I'll be done in a minute." Elena ran her hand across the cabinet's surface. The metal was cold despite the August heat pressing against the house's single-pane windows. Combination lock hung on the front. 4 dials, numbers 0 through 9, 10,000 possible combinations her father had never shared. She'd asked him once, maybe 10 years ago during one of his brief periods of sobriety, what was inside. He'd smiled with the kind of sadness that came from knowing too much and accomplishing too little. "Everything that matters, Mija. Everything I couldn't give you while I was busy being a fool." He died 3 months later. Liver failure at 57. The funeral cost $2,800 she didn't have, paid for by a credit card she'd never be able to clear. His estate consisted of this house, mortgaged to 140% of its value, and whatever was locked in this cabinet that probably held rusted tools and broken dreams. The real estate agent had been clear when Elena called about selling the property. "Ms. Ruiz, I'll be honest with you. The neighborhood's deteriorated significantly. The house needs at least $80,000 in foundation work alone. Between the mortgage debt and the condition, you'd be lucky to break even. Most likely, you'll owe money at closing. So the house would go to foreclosure. The bank would claim it, demolish it, sell the land to developers who'd build luxury condos marketed to people who'd never had to choose between electricity and groceries. And this cabinet would end up in a landfill unless Elena could get it open and determine if anything inside was worth salvaging. She pulled out her phone and searched how to open combination lock without code. The results were useless. YouTube videos of teenagers picking school lockers, forums discussing illegal methods, articles about hiring locksmiths at $200 minimum. She had $487. Locksmiths weren't an option. Footsteps on the stairs. Mia appeared, backpack still on her shoulders like she hadn't decided whether they were staying or leaving. Her daughter had learned not to unpack until she was certain a place was home. And this house, with its peeling paint and water-stained ceilings and the ghost of Elena's father in every corner, didn't feel like home to either of them. "We're not going back to the storage unit, are we?" The question hit Elena in the chest. 3 weeks they'd lived there after the last apartment eviction. 3 weeks of Mia doing homework by flashlight, bathing in gas station bathrooms, sleeping on a camping mat between boxes of everything they owned. 3 weeks of Elena promising it was temporary while knowing she had no plan beyond survival. "No, baby, we're staying here for a bit, just until I figure things out." Mia nodded, familiar with the phrase "figure things out," that meant her mother was drowning but trying to appear calm. She was too young to carry that knowledge, but poverty aged children fast. "Can I help with the cabinet?" Elena almost said no, wanted to protect her daughter from this final humiliation of sorting through her grandfather's worthless possessions. But Mia's eyes held hope, and hope was dangerous to crush even when it was foolish. "Yeah, baby, come help me think." They sat on the concrete floor together, staring at the combination lock like it was a puzzle that could be solved through concentration alone. The dial showed 0-0-0-0. 4 zeros. A blank slate. 10,000 possible combinations. What about Abuelo's birthday? Mia suggested. Elena tried 0-3-1-7 for March 17th. Nothing. She tried 1-9-5-2 for the year. Nothing. She tried her own birthday, her mother's birthday, their old address, the factory where her father had worked for 30 years before automation eliminated his position. Nothing. 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 An hour passed. Then 2. The basement grew darker as afternoon became evening. Upstairs, the house settled with creaks that sounded like judgment. Elena's phone showed 6:47 p.m. and a text from Marcus, her ex-husband, reminding her that child support was late again, and if she didn't pay by Friday, he'd file for full custody, because clearly she couldn't provide a stable home. The rage that filled her chest was familiar, hot and useless and exhausting. Marcus had left when Mia was 2, contributed exactly $400 total in 6 years, then suddenly cared about custody when his new wife wanted to play mother to someone else's child. The courts would side with him. He had a house, a job, stability. Elena had $487 and a basement. Mama, you're crying. She wasn't. Not really. Just eyes burning with exhaustion and defeat and the terrible mathematics of being poor in America, where every door required money to open and poverty was expensive in ways wealthy people could never comprehend. I'm okay, baby. Just thinking. Mia stood and wrapped her arms around Elena's neck. 8 years old, and already she'd learned to comfort her mother through failures she was too young to understand. The embrace lasted long enough for Elena to remember why she kept fighting. Not for herself, but for this small person who deserved better than inherited trauma and government cheese and storage units. When they finally separated, Mia returned to examining the cabinet with renewed focus. She ran her small fingers along the seams where door met frame, searching for gaps or weaknesses. Then she stopped, tilted her head, and pointed to something Elena had never noticed. Mama, there's writing here. Really small. Elena leaned closer, scratched into the metal near the bottom. Hinge, almost invisible unless you knew to look. La respuesta está en su nombre. The answer is in her name. Her breath caught. Her father's handwriting. Crude letters carved with a nail or screwdriver years ago. A message meant for her? For someone else? The phrase was singular, her, not your, suggesting he'd intended this for a specific woman. Her mother's name had been Carmen. Elena tried 2-2-7-6 for the letters on a phone keypad. Nothing. She tried different variations, birth year combinations, anything connected to Carmen Ruiz. Nothing worked. Maybe even my name? Mia suggested. Mia, Elena Ruiz. For letters in Mia. The numbers on the dials went 0 to 9. If A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. Then M equals 13, I equals 9, A equals 1. But that was 5 digits for a 4-dial lock. Elena's mind raced through possibilities. What if it was just Mia, phonetically? What if her father had somehow known, had somehow predicted this moment despite dying when Mia was 5 years old? She tried 1-3-9-1 for MIA, using the alphabet position of the first letter of each letter. Nothing. What if it was simpler? What if her name meant something else entirely? That hit her. Elena. Her own name. Not Carmen. Not Mia. The answer is in her name, his daughter's name. The one he'd watched grow up, the one he'd failed repeatedly, the one he'd left this cabinet for. Elena. She tried 5-12-5-14. Too many digits. She tried the first 4 letters. 5-12-5-14 became 5-1-2-5 by dropping the tens place. The first dial clicked. Her hands trembled as she turned the second dial to 1. Another click, softer than the first but unmistakable. The third dial turned to 2. The fourth to 5. 5-1-2-5. Yelian spelled numerically, simplified. She pulled the lock. It released with a snap that echoed in the basement like a gunshot. "You did it." Mia jumped up and down, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Elena stared at the unlocked cabinet, suddenly terrified of what was inside. 34 years her father had kept this locked. 34 years of whatever mattered enough to hide, but not enough to share while living. "Stand back a little, baby." She gripped the cabinet handle, cold metal that had waited decades for this moment, and pulled. The door groaned open on hinges that hadn't moved since Reagan was president. No explosive revelation. No hidden treasure immediately visible. Just darkness and the smell of old metal and something else. Something chemical and preserved. Elena pulled out her phone, turned on the flashlight, and directed the beam inside. The cabinet interior was lined with black velvet that had faded to gray. Shelves divided the space into compartments, and on those shelves sat rows and rows of small wooden boxes, maybe 200 of them, each about the size of a deck of cards. Each one labeled in her father's handwriting with codes that made no sense. GRD 47 V SAP 92 VS2 RBY 18 AA EMR 63 VVS1. Elena pulled down the nearest box, GRD 47V, and opened it carefully. Inside, nestled in more velvet, sat a stone. Clear, brilliant, catching her phone's light and throwing it back in rainbow fragments that painted the basement walls with color. A diamond. Not a small one. Not a piece of jewelry. A loose diamond, perhaps 2 carats, cut and polished and absolutely real in a way that made Elena's hands shake so badly she almost dropped the box. "Mama, what is that?" Elena couldn't speak. She set down the first box and pulled down another. SAP 92 VS2. Blue stone. Deep blue like ocean at depth. Sapphire, her mind supplied, though she'd never seen a sapphire outside of magazines. Another box. RBY 18 AA. Red stone. Blood red. Ruby. Another. EMR 63 VVS1. Green stone. Emerald. She pulled down box after box, hands moving faster, breath coming shorter, mind refusing to process what her eyes were showing her. Diamonds. Sapphires. Rubies. Emeralds. Some small, some massive. Some in clusters, some solo. All loose, all cut, all real. The basement spun. Elena sat down hard on the concrete floor, boxes scattered around her like treasure from a children's story, except this was real. This was happening. This was impossible. "Mama? Mama, are you okay?" Mia's voice came from far away. Elena tried to respond, but her throat had closed. She picked up another box at random. The label read DIA call 1960s with a subnote. Amsterdam estate acquisition, verified. Inside sat 15 diamonds, graduated sizes, each one brilliant and perfect. Her father's voice echoed in memory. "Everything that matters, Mija. Everything I couldn't give you while I was busy being a fool." This couldn't be real. Rafael Ruiz had worked a factory job for 30 years. Had died with $1,247 in his bank account. Had never owned anything valuable. Never traveled anywhere exotic. Never lived any life that would explain why a basement cabinet contained what looked like a jewelry store's entire inventory of loose gemstones. But the stones in her hands were real. The weight of them, the way they caught light, the precision of the cuts, these weren't glass or fake. These were real. Elena's phone buzzed. Marcus again. "Elena, I'm serious about Friday. Get your act together or Mia's coming to live with me and Jessica. She deserves stability." She looked at the boxes surrounding her. Looked at Mia, whose eyes were wide with wonder and confusion. Looked at her phone showing $487 and 72 hours until eviction. "Mama, are these real?" The question deserved honesty, even though honesty seemed insane. "I think so, baby. I think these are real gemstones." "Are we rich?" The innocent hope in that question could have broken Elena if she weren't already shattered. Rich. The word felt foreign in her mouth, impossible to claim when she'd spent 8 years choosing between gas and food, when Mia's shoes had holes because new ones cost $40 they didn't have, when rich meant people who didn't check their account balance before buying milk. I don't know yet. We need to find out what these are worth, how to sell them, if they're even legal to own. But even as she spoke, Elena's mind was calculating. If each box held stones worth even $1,000, a laughably conservative estimate given the size of some of these diamonds, and there were 200 boxes, that was $200,000. Enough to pay off every debt, enough for a real apartment, enough for Mia's college fund and her own nursing degree, and maybe, finally, breathing room. If the stones were worth more, and the largest diamond looked to be at least 5 carats, the numbers became absurd. Millions. Tens of millions. Wealth so vast it couldn't be real, couldn't be happening to someone like Elena, who'd never caught a break in her life. She pulled out another box. The label read, Maharaja Collection, Cartier Verified, 1963. Inside sat a single ruby the size of a quarter, blood red, with a star pattern that appeared when light hit it at certain angles. Elena had seen enough crime dramas to know star rubies were rare, had seen enough antique shows to know Cartier verification meant serious provenance, had seen enough pawn shops to know her father couldn't have afforded this on a factory salary. What'd he gotten these? The question formed ice in her stomach. Her father had never been a thief, drunk, yes, unreliable, absolutely, but dishonest? She didn't think so. But people didn't just accumulate millions in gemstones through factory wages and smart savings. She needed answers, needed to understand what she'd found before deciding what to do with it. But first, she needed to make sure these stones were real, were legal, were hers to claim. Elena stood on shaking legs and pulled down every remaining box, creating neat rows on the basement floor. 247 boxes total, each one labeled with codes that suggested professional cataloging, each one containing stones that caught light like imprisoned stars. In the very back of the cabinet, behind where the boxes had sat, Elena found a manila envelope taped to the rear wall, her name written on the front in her father's handwriting. For Elena, open only after you found the stones. Her hands shook worse opening the envelope than they had opening the cabinet. Inside, yellowed paper covered in her father's careful script. A letter, written years ago based on the paper's condition, written for this exact moment. Mija, if you're reading this, I'm dead and you've opened the cabinet. I'm glad. I worried you'd never find it, never know what I spent my life protecting for you. These stones are real. They're legal. They're yours. I know you're confused. I know you're wondering how a factory worker accumulated millions in gemstones. The truth is complicated, and I need you to understand the full story before you do anything with what you found. Your grandfather, my father, Antonio Ruiz, wasn't just a ranch hand in Chihuahua like I told you. He was a gemstone courier for legitimate dealers across Mexico and South America in the 1940s and 50s. He carried stones between mines, dealers, and buyers before modern security existed. It was dangerous work. 3 of his friends died doing it. But Antonio was smart, careful, and lucky. In 1954, he was transporting a collection for a dealer in Colombia. The dealer was murdered before the delivery. Cartel violence over territory. The stones became evidence in a police investigation that went nowhere because corruption ran too deep. My father waited 2 years. When no one claimed them, when the investigation closed with no resolution, he kept the stones. Not stealing. The dealer was dead. The police were paid off, and the cartel that killed him had already moved on. Those stones would have vanished into evidence rooms or been stolen by corrupt officers. My father preserved them instead. He brought them to America in 1957 when he emigrated legally. Hid them for decades because he didn't know how to sell them without raising questions. He was terrified immigration would deport him if authorities found out he had anything valuable. So he kept them hidden, working ranch jobs, raising me in poverty while sitting on a fortune he was too afraid to touch. He died in 1981 when I was 29. Left me the stones with the same letter, I'm now leaving you. He'd cataloged everything, provenance, certifications, dealer records from the 1940s and 50s. Everything legal, everything documented, everything real. I was supposed to sell them. Start fresh. give you the life he couldn't give me. But I was a coward, Mija. I was terrified. Terrified of attention, of questions, of the IRS, of making mistakes. So I did what my father did. I hid them. I worked the factory. I drank. I failed you and your mother while sitting on wealth that could have saved us all. I'm so sorry, Elena. Sorry I wasn't brave enough to use what I had. Sorry I let you grow up struggling when I could have changed everything. Sorry I'm leaving you with the same burden and decision my father left me. But maybe you're braver than I was. Maybe you'll do what I couldn't. Sell them. Use them. Build the life you deserve. The documentation is in a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Box 247. The key is taped to the bottom of the third shelf in the cabinet. The box is registered in my name, but my will, filed with my death certificate, transfers all contents to you. The documentation includes original certificates of authenticity from 1940s to 1950s dealers, gemological laboratory reports from 1960s to 1970s verifications, provenance records showing legitimate chain of ownership, letters from dealers confirming legal acquisition, my own appraisals from 2010. I had 3 stones independently verified by separate appraisers who didn't know I had more, based on those 2010 appraisals and conservative estimates of current market value. You're holding between $300 million and $450 million in gemstones. Yes, Mija. Read that again. $300 to $400 million. I know you're terrified. I know you're wondering if this is legal, if you'll go to jail, if someone will take them from you. But they're yours. Legally yours. The documentation proves it. Sell them through Christie's or Sotheby's, major auction houses that handle estate sales. They'll verify everything, handle the legal aspects, and find buyers. You'll pay taxes, keep 40% for federal and state. But what remains will still change your life forever. Don't make my mistake. Don't hide from this gift because you're afraid. Be brave. Use it. Give Mia what I couldn't give you. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you this while alive. I tried so many times, but the words wouldn't come. Easier to write them for after I'm gone, when you can't yell at me for being coward. You're stronger than I ever was. You'll know what to do. Papa, Elena read the letter 3 times. Then a 4th. The words didn't change. The numbers didn't change. $300 to $400 million. She sat on the basement floor, surrounded by boxes of gemstones that represented more money than she could comprehend, more money than made sense, holding a letter from her dead father explaining that his cowardice had condemned 3 generations to poverty when salvation had been locked in a cabinet the entire time. The rage should have come first. Should have burned through her chest at all the nights she'd gone hungry so Mia could eat, at all the evictions and disconnections and humiliations that could have been avoided if her father had been brave enough to sell even 1 stone. But instead, she felt nothing. No rage, no joy, no relief. Just vast numbness that came from her entire understanding of reality shattering in the space of an hour. Mama? Is the letter from Abuelo? Mia's voice pulled her back. Elena looked at her daughter, 8 years old, wearing second-hand clothes, living in storage units, about to be taken by an ex-husband who'd contributed nothing but suddenly wanted custody. The numbness cracked. Beneath it, something cold and certain crystallized. Her father had been too afraid to use this gift. His father before him had been too afraid. 3 generations of Ruiz men paralyzed by fear and poverty and the immigrant terror of drawing attention from authorities. But Elena was done being afraid, done accepting that suffering was her inheritance, done teaching her daughter that poverty was permanent. She folded her father's letter carefully and tucked it back in the envelope. Then she pulled Mia close and spoke words she'd never believed she'd be able to say. Baby, everything just changed. We're going to be okay. Better than okay. We're going to have the life you deserve. Mia looked up with 8-year-old skepticism born from too many broken promises. Because of the pretty rocks? Because of the pretty rocks. Because your abuelo and your bisabuelo saved something precious for us. And because we're brave enough to accept the gift they couldn't. The basement felt different now. Not a tomb of her father's failures, but a vault that had protected a fortune for 70 years, waiting for someone brave enough to claim it. Elena pulled the key from beneath the third shelf, exactly where her father's letter had indicated. Small brass key with First National 247 engraved on the head. Tomorrow she'd visit the bank. Tomorrow she'd see the documentation. Tomorrow she'd start the process of turning gemstones into security. But tonight, she needed to sleep. Needed to hold Mia close and let the impossible truth settle into something she could believe. They carried boxes upstairs, just a few, enough to keep close, not trusting leaving them all in the basement overnight, even though no one knew they existed. Elena locked the cabinet again, this time with the knowledge of what it protected. In the bedroom that had been hers as a child, she and Mia lay on the old mattress that smelled of dust and memory. Mia fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the day's emotional weight. But Elena stayed awake, staring at the ceiling where water stains formed patterns that looked almost like maps. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus, final warning, Elena. Friday, or I'm filing." She smiled in the darkness. Let him file. Let him try. In a week, maybe two, she'd have documentation proving she was about to sell the largest private gemstone collection ever to hit auction. She'd have lawyers, real ones, expensive ones, who'd make Marcus's custody petition look like the pathetic attempt at control it was. She'd have money, not just enough to survive, but enough to thrive, to build, to create the life poverty had stolen from 3 generations of her family. But first, she needed to get through tomorrow. Needed to verify her father's claims. Needed to make sure this wasn't some elaborate delusion born from decades of his alcoholism and disappointment. The stones sitting on the dresser caught streetlight from the window and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. Real. They had to be real. Their weight, their brilliance, their perfect cuts, glass and fake didn't do that. Elena closed her eyes and imagined her father's face the day he bought this cabinet. 1987. She'd been a baby. He'd been 34, same age she was now, standing in some government surplus warehouse looking at an ugly green cabinet and seeing possibility. Seeing a vault that could protect his father's secret for his daughter's future. He'd failed at almost everything. But this one thing, he'd done right. $300 to $400 million. The number was too large to feel real. But tomorrow it would start becoming real. Tomorrow she'd transform gemstones into security, potential into power, inheritance into salvation. For tonight, she just needed to sleep. Morning came too bright and too real. Elena woke to Mia's weight pressed against her side and sunlight cutting through curtains that hadn't been washed in years. For 3 seconds, she existed in the familiar poverty of her life. The anxiety about money, the dread of Marcus's threats, the exhaustion that came from never having enough. Then memory crashed back. The cabinet, the stones, the letter, $300 to $400 million. She sat up carefully, not wanting to wake Mia. The boxes on the dresser were still there, still real, still throwing light in ways that glass couldn't replicate. Not a dream, not a delusion. Real. Her phone showed 6:47 a.m. and 3 missed calls from Marcus. She deleted the voicemail notifications without listening. Whatever threats he'd left didn't matter anymore. By this time next week, she'd have lawyers who'd make his custody petition look like the joke it was. But first, she needed verification. Her father's letter had been clear: safety deposit box, documentation, proof that everything was legal and real. First National Bank opened at 9. She had 2 hours to shower, feed Mia, and prepare for the conversation that would change everything. The shower ran cold because the water heater had died sometime last year and her father never fixed it. Elena washed quickly, shivering, letting the physical discomfort ground her in reality. Rich people didn't shower in cold water. Rich people fixed things immediately or bought new houses where everything worked. Soon, maybe very soon, she'd be one of those people. The thought felt obscene, like trying on a costume that didn't fit. Mia woke hungry, and Elena realized the refrigerator was empty except for a half-gallon of milk past its expiration date and condiment packets from fast food restaurants. She had $487 in her account. Breakfast at McDonald's would cost $12. She could afford it. They drove to the nearest McDonald's in Elena's 2004 Honda Civic that burned oil and made concerning sounds when accelerating. Mia ordered pancakes and orange juice with the careful restraint of a child who'd learned not to ask for too much. Elena ordered coffee and nothing else, watching her daughter eat while calculating how many more meals like this she'd need to endure before verification came through. "Mama, what are we doing today?" The question deserved partial honesty. Full truth would terrify an 8-year-old or make her say something to the wrong person. They couldn't risk words spreading before Elena had legal protection in place. "We're going to a bank. I need to check something Abuelo left for us. Then maybe we'll get you new shoes. Would you like that?" Mia's face lit up with the kind of joy that should have come from Disneyland or Christmas, not the promise of basic footwear. "Really? New ones that fit?" "Really, baby. New ones that fit." First National Bank sat in a downtown district that had seen better decades. The building itself was solid, 1920s architecture with marble floors and high ceilings. But the neighborhood around it had deteriorated into pawn shops and check cashing places that preyed on people exactly like Elena used to be. Like she still was, technically, until verification happened. Inside, the bank was nearly empty. A security guard by the door, 2 tellers behind bulletproof glass, and a customer service desk where a woman in her 50s typed at a computer with the slow precision of someone who'd never quite mastered technology. Elena approached with Mia's hand tight in hers. The woman looked up with professional courtesy that didn't reach her eyes. "Can I help you? I need to access a safety deposit box. Number 247. It was my father's. Rafael Ruiz. He passed away 3 months ago." The woman's expression shifted slightly. Not quite sympathy, but acknowledgement of death's administrative burden. "I'll need to see death certificate, identification proving you're the heir, and the key." Elena had brought everything. Death certificate in a folder that also contained her father's will, such as it was. 1 page filed with legal aid naming her sole beneficiary of all assets and possessions. Her driver's license. The small brass key. The woman examined each document with bureaucratic thoroughness, occasionally glancing at Elena like she might be attempting fraud. Finally, satisfied, she stood and gestured toward a secured door. "Follow me, please." They descended stairs into a basement vault that smelled of concrete and old paper. Rows of deposit boxes lined walls, each one locked, each one containing someone's secrets or valuables or both. The woman located 247, a large box, one of the bigger sizes, and inserted her master key while Elena used the brass key her father had hidden. The box slid out heavy and substantial. "I'll give you privacy. Room 3 is available." The woman gestured toward a small windowless room with a table and chair. "Take as much time as you need." Elena carried the box into the room, Mia trailing behind with curiosity and nervousness in equal measure. The door closed with a soft click. They were alone. The box contained 3 large manila envelopes, each one labeled in her father's handwriting. Envelope 1, Certifications and Provenance, 1940s to 1950s. Envelope 2, Modern Verifications, 1960s to 2010s. Envelope 3, Legal Documentation and Appraisals. Elena opened the first envelope with hands that trembled despite her attempt at steadiness. Inside, yellow documents in Spanish and English. Certificates from Colombian, Brazilian, and Burmese gem dealers dated between 1947 and 1954. Each one detailing specific stones, weights, colors, cuts, origins, with signatures and official stamps that had faded but remained legible. One certificate from Casa de Piedras Preciosas, Bogotá, dated March 1954, listed a collection of 15 diamonds, various sapphires, and 8 rubies being transported for Señor Antonio Ruiz, courier authorized by Delgado and Sons Mining Concern. Another from a Brazilian dealer in Sao Paulo detailed emerald purchases made legally through licensed operations, with export documentation showing they'd left the country through proper channels. The provenance was exactly what her father had claimed. Legitimate gem dealing from an era when security was minimal and couriers were trusted with fortunes. Envelope 2 contained more recent documentation. Gemological laboratory reports from the 1960s and 1970s, when her grandfather had apparently gotten nervous enough to verify what he had. Each report confirmed authenticity, provided detailed grading using modern standards, and noted when stones were particularly rare or valuable. One report from 1973 made Elena's breath catch. Star ruby, 47. 3 carats, Burmese origin, pigeon's blood color with pronounced asterism. Exceptionally rare specimen. Estimated value, $850,000, 1973 market conditions. She did quick math in her head. A stone worth $850,000 in 1973 would be worth millions now. And that was just one stone. The cabinet held 247 boxes. The third envelope contained her father's contribution. Appraisal reports from 2010 showing he'd selected 3 stones at random, a diamond, a sapphire, and an emerald, and had them independently verified by 3 different appraisers who each confirmed authenticity and provided conservative value estimates. The diamond, 2 carats, internally flawless, D color. Estimated value, $180,000. The sapphire, 7 carats, Ceylon origin, cornflower blue. Estimated value, $95,000. The emerald, 1 carats, Colombian origin, minor inclusions. Estimated value, $140,000. 3 stones, $415,000 total. And her father had 244 boxes remaining. At the bottom of the third envelope, a single sheet in her father's handwriting titled Conservative Total Estimate, 2010. He'd cataloged every box, listed every stone, and applied conservative per carat values based on the 3 appraisals he'd obtained. The math covered 2 pages of careful addition. The total at the bottom was circled 3 times, $287 million, conservative estimate, 2010 values. Below that, a note, current market likely 30 to 50% higher. Rare pieces could auction for multiples of estimate. Total realistic range, $350 million to $450 million. Elena set down the paper carefully, like it might combust. Her father hadn't been exaggerating. If anything, he'd been conservative. $300 to $400 million. Real. Documented. Legal. Mama, what do all these papers mean? Mia's question pulled Elena back from the edge of vertigo. She looked at her daughter, 8 years old, wearing a donated t-shirt, shoes with holes, hair that needed cutting because salon visits cost money they hadn't had. They mean Abuelo was telling the truth, baby. The stones are real. They're worth a lot of money. Enough to change our lives. How much money? How did you explain hundreds of millions to a child who thought $20 was a fortune? Enough that you never have to worry about anything ever again. Enough that you can go to any college you want. Enough that we can have a real home and I can stop working 3 jobs and you can have everything you've ever wanted. Mia processed this with the seriousness of someone who'd learned early that money determined everything. Are we rich now? Not yet, but soon. Very soon. Elena photographed every document with her phone, creating digital backup in case something happened to the originals. Then she carefully returned everything to the envelopes, replaced them in the safety deposit box, and locked it again. The bank woman was waiting when they emerged. Everything in order? Yes. Thank you. I'll be back soon to close the box and transfer the contents. Outside, morning had become midday. Traffic moved past the bank in the endless flow of people going to jobs and lives and ordinary existence that Elena was about to leave behind forever. She pulled out her phone and searched Christie's auction house contact. The website was elegant, understated, designed for people who casually sold art and jewelry worth millions. A contact form promised response within 48 hours. Elena filled it out, sitting in her car with Mia buckled beside her. I recently inherited a substantial private collection of gemstones with full provenance documentation dating to the 1940s to 1950s. Collection includes diamonds, sapphires, rubies, and emeralds. Conservative estimates suggest total value between $350 to $450 million. Request consultation regarding authentication and potential auction. Documentation available immediately. She hesitated before hitting send. Once she did this, there was no going back. Once Christie's knew, once verification began, the secret would spread. People would know. Questions would come. Her life would never be private again. But privacy had never protected her. Silence had never fed Mia. Anonymity had never paid rent. She hit send. The confirmation message promised someone would contact her within 2 business days. 2 days. 48 hours between poverty and proof. Mama, can we get my shoes now? Elena looked at her daughter and made a decision. They had $487. New shoes cost maybe $60. She could afford it. Could afford to give Mia one small piece of normal before everything changed. Yeah, baby, let's get you shoes. And maybe some new clothes. And lunch somewhere nice. Today we celebrate a little bit. They went to Target. Not Nordstrom. Not yet. But Target felt like luxury when you've been shopping at Goodwill. Mia chose light-up sneakers that cost $45 and made her grin so wide Elena's chest ached. They added jeans that fit, 3 shirts without stains, and a jacket for fall that was coming. At checkout, the total was $187. Elena swiped her debit card and didn't check her balance first. Didn't calculate whether she could afford it. Just paid and felt this strange lightness of spending money without terror. They ate lunch at Panera. Soup and sandwich, nothing fancy but clean and calm, and the kind of place where Mia could use a real bathroom without Elena hovering anxiously. Her daughter ate slowly, savoring, occasionally touching her new shoes like they might disappear. Mama, when we're rich, can we get a house with a backyard? The question was so modest, it broke something in Elena. Not a mansion, not a car, just a backyard. The dream of a child who'd never had space to play. Baby, when we're rich, you can have a backyard and a dog and your own bedroom with whatever color you want on the walls. We can have everything you've ever wanted. Mia's eyes went distant, imagining possibilities she'd learned not to hope for. Can Abuelo see us? Do you think he knows we found his treasure? Elena's throat closed. She'd been angry at her father for so long. Angry at his drinking, his failures, his absence. Angry that he'd died, leaving her with debt and a house that was worthless. But he'd also left her salvation. Had spent his life guarding something precious, too afraid to use it himself, but determined to preserve it for her. That was love, even if it was cowardly love. That was sacrifice, even if it came wrapped in failure. Yeah, baby, I think he knows. I think he's happy we found it. I think he's sorry he wasn't brave enough to give it to us while he was alive, but happy we're brave enough to accept it now. They finished lunch in comfortable silence. Elena paid the check, $28. 47, without flinching. Her account now showed $272. 53. In the old life, that would have triggered panic. In the new life that was coming, it was meaningless. Her phone buzzed. Email notification. She opened it expecting spam. Subject line, Gemstone Collection Inquiry. Urgent response from Christie's. Her heart rate tripled. 2 business days, they'd said. It had been 3 hours. The email was brief. Ms. Ruiz, thank you for your inquiry. Based on the estimated value and description you provided, we're expediting our response. I'm Sarah Chun, Senior Specialist in our Jewelry Department. I'd like to schedule a call today, if possible, to discuss authentication procedures and preliminary evaluation. Please call my direct line at your earliest convenience. Number provided. This is time-sensitive as collections of this magnitude require immediate security protocols and verification measures. Regards, Sarah Chun, Senior Jewelry, Specialist, Christie's Auction House. Time-sensitive. Security protocols. The language of people who dealt with fortunes so large they required special handling. Elena's hands shook dialing the number. It rang twice before a voice answered. Professional, educated, careful. Sarah Chun speaking. Ms. Chun, this is Elena Ruiz. I just received your email about the gemstone collection. A pause. Then, Ms. Ruiz, thank you for calling so quickly. I need to ask some preliminary questions to determine how we should proceed. First, can you confirm the collection is currently in your physical possession? Yes. Most of it is secured in my home. Documentation is in a bank safety deposit box. In the provenance you mentioned, you have original certificates from 1940s to 1950s dealers? Yes. Colombian, Brazilian, and Burmese dealers, all properly documented, plus modern gemological reports and recent appraisals. Another pause, longer this time. Elena could hear typing in the background. Ms. Ruiz, I'm going to be direct with you. If your description is accurate, and I'm not questioning your honesty, just managing expectations, you're describing one of the most significant private gemstone collections to come to market in modern history. Before we proceed, I need to verify several things. Are you comfortable answering some questions? Yes. How did you acquire this collection? Elena explained carefully. Her grandfather, the courier, the 1954 Columbia shipment, the murdered dealer, the stones preserved legally when no one claimed them, her father's inheritance, the locked cabinet, the documentation trail proving everything. Sarah Chun listened without interrupting. When Elena finished, there was a long silence. Ms. Ruiz, what you're describing is extraordinarily rare. Not just the stones themselves, but the provenance. Documented 1940s to 1950s gemstones with clear chain of ownership are incredibly valuable because they predate modern conflict diamond regulations and have established legal history. If your documentation supports your claims, Christie's would be very interested in representing this sale. What happens next? Next, I need to see the documentation and examine sample stones. I can fly to you. Where are you located? Phoenix, Arizona. I could be there tomorrow. We'll need to verify authenticity, confirm provenance, and discuss security measures. Collections of this value require specialized handling. We're talking about armed transport, secure storage, insurance during authentication. This isn't a typical estate sale. Tomorrow, 24 hours from verification. What happens if everything checks out? If the stones are genuine and the documentation is solid, we'll move to formal consignment. You'll sign with Christie's. We'll transport the collection to our New York vault, conduct complete gemological analysis, photograph every piece, create catalog descriptions, and prepare for auction. For a collection this size, we'd likely schedule a standalone evening sale, rare gems, and exceptional pieces only. That generates maximum bidding competition and media attention. How long does that take? From consignment to auction, typically 6 to 8 months. We need time to authenticate every stone, create proper documentation, market to serious collectors and dealers worldwide. But Ms. Ruiz, I want to manage your expectations. You mentioned $350 to $450 million. That's based on what estimation method? Elena explained her father's conservative per carat calculations and the 2010 appraisals. Sarah's response came carefully measured. Conservative estimates are good for planning purposes, but auction results can vary significantly. Some pieces might exceed expectations. Others might sell for less than hoped. Until we examine everything and determine what you actually have, I can't confirm value. Do you understand? Yes. But if the documentation is accurate, if the stones are as described, what's realistic? A pause. Then, if, and this is a significant if, you have what you've described with proper documentation authenticated by our gemologists and marketed correctly, auction total could potentially exceed your estimates. Major colored stones are trending higher than diamonds currently. Star rubies, large sapphires, fine emeralds. These are commanding premium prices. But I won't know until I see them. I understand. When can you come? I'll catch a flight tonight. Can you meet me tomorrow morning at 10? I'll need a secure location, not your home. Is there a bank or law office we could use? Elena thought quickly. First National Bank downtown has private rooms. I have a safety deposit box there already. I can arrange for us to use a conference room. Perfect. I'll bring portable testing equipment. We'll examine samples, review documentation, and if everything is legitimate, we'll discuss next steps. Ms. Ruiz, one more thing. Yes. Don't tell anyone else about this. Not friends, not family, not neighbors. Collections this valuable attract the wrong attention. Until we have proper security in place, the fewer people who know, the better. Do you understand? The warning sent ice down Elena's spine. She'd been so focused on verification and sale that she hadn't considered danger. But $400 million in gemstones sitting in a basement would attract thieves if word spread. I understand. I haven't told anyone except my daughter, and she's 8. She doesn't understand the value. Good. Keep it that way. I'll email you confirmation tonight with exact meeting time and location. And Ms. Ruiz? Yes. If this is real, if your documentation supports what you've described, your life is about to change in ways you can't imagine. Prepare yourself. The call ended. Elena sat in the Panera parking lot with Mia, playing with her new shoes in reality, tilting on its axis. Tomorrow. Time. Verification that would confirm whether she was delusional or about to become one of the wealthiest women in America. Mama, you look scared. Is everything okay? Elena forced a smile. Everything's fine, baby. That was a woman who's going to help us sell Abuelo's stones. She's coming tomorrow to look at them, and then we'll be rich. Then we'll know for sure if we're rich. But I really think we are. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in the childhood bedroom, staring at ceiling stains and mentally cataloging everything that would change. New house, new car, college fund, medical insurance that actually covered things, groceries without checking prices, clothes without holes, security, stability, the ability to breathe without the constant weight of poverty crushing her chest. But also, attention she'd never wanted. Wealth she had no idea how to manage. Relatives who'd ignored her when she was poor suddenly appearing with their hands out. Marcus's custody suit becoming more complicated when he realized she had money worth fighting for. The stones on the dresser caught streetlight and threw patterns across the walls. Beautiful, valuable, dangerous. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. This is Sarah Chun. Confirmed for 10 a.m. tomorrow at First National Bank. Bring all documentation and at least 10 to 15 sample stones representing the collection's range. See you then. Elena texted back, I'll be there. Then she lay awake until dawn, listening to Mia breathe softly in sleep, and tried to imagine a future where money wasn't the enemy, where bills got paid automatically, where her daughter could have everything she deserved, where Elena herself could finally stop running from poverty that had chased 3 generations. The cabinet downstairs held salvation. Tomorrow would prove whether that salvation was real. Morning came gray and uncertain. Elena woke Mia early, dressed her in the new clothes, made breakfast from the groceries she'd bought yesterday. Real eggs, Real bread, orange juice that wasn't from concentrate. Why are we getting fancy, Mama? Because today is important. Today is the day we find out for sure. She selected 15 stones from the cabinet, choosing variety. Diamonds of different sizes, sapphires from pale to deep blue, rubies from blood red to pink, emeralds from grass green to dark forest. Each box got tucked into a canvas bag she'd bought at Target yesterday. 15 small boxes that might represent $50 million if her father's estimates were accurate. The documentation came from the safety deposit box. She'd retrieved it that morning before Mia woke, signing forms and ignoring the bank woman's curious glances. They arrived at First National 15 minutes early. Elena had called ahead, explained she needed a conference room for a private business meeting, offered to pay rental fees. The bank manager, a man in his 60s who'd known her father slightly, had agreed without asking many questions. The conference room was small but professional. Glass walls, solid table, chairs that didn't wobble. Elena arranged the boxes in neat rows and placed the documentation in organized stacks. Mia sat in the corner with a coloring book, quietly occupying herself in the way children of poverty learned early. At 9:58 a.m., the bank manager knocked and opened the door. Ms. Ruiz, your appointment is here. Sarah Chun entered looking exactly like her voice suggested. Early 40s, Asian American, dressed in expensive but understated business clothes that whispered wealth without shouting it. She carried a leather briefcase and moved with the confidence of someone who'd handled fortunes so large they become abstract. Behind her came a man, 50-something, white, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Elena's car. Sarah made introductions. Ms. Ruiz, this is James Bradford, our senior gemologist. I brought him because if your collection is as described, I need expert verification immediately. They shook hands. Professional courtesy masking the fact that Elena was being evaluated as much as the stones were. Shall we begin? Sarah gestured to the table where Elena had arranged everything. For the next 3 hours, Sarah and James worked with methodical precision. They examined each stone under jewelers' loupes and portable microscopes. They tested hardness, checked for treatments, analyzed color under different lights. They photographed every piece from multiple angles. Meanwhile, Sarah reviewed the documentation with laser focus. Every certificate, every provenance record, every appraisal report. She made notes on a tablet, occasionally asking Elena questions about her grandfather's career or her father's storage methods. Mia stayed quiet in the corner, coloring, occasionally glancing up when Sarah or James made sounds of surprise or interest. Around 12:30 p.m., James set down the last stone and looked at Sarah with an expression Elena couldn't read. Well, Sarah's voice was carefully neutral. James spoke slowly, measuring each word. Every piece I've examined is genuine. No treatments detected. Colors are natural. Cuts are period appropriate for 1940s to 1950s work. Quality ranges from very good to exceptional. The star ruby alone, if it's representative of the collection, is museum grade. I need to see everything to give a complete assessment, but based on these samples, Ms. Ruiz's description appears accurate. Sarah turned to Elena. Her professional mask had cracked slightly, revealing genuine excitement beneath. Ms. Ruiz, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've handled estate sales from European royalty, celebrity collections, pieces from dissolved fortunes. What you have is extraordinary. Not just the stones themselves, but the provenance. The documentation is airtight, everything verified, everything legitimate, everything traceable. This is exactly the kind of collection that generates international bidding wars. Elena's voice came out smaller than she intended. So it's real? It's all real? It's real. And if the remaining 232 boxes match the quality of these samples, we're looking at an auction that will make headlines. This could be the most significant private gemstone sale in a decade. James added, the star ruby alone could bring $15 to $20 million at auction. The large diamonds, properly marketed, could each command $5 to $10 million. The sapphires, especially the Ceylon stones, are trending extremely high right now. Conservative estimate based on what I've seen, north of $350 million total. Aggressive estimate with strong bidding could exceed $500 million. The number hit Elena like physical impact. $500 million. $500 million. More money than she could comprehend, could imagine, could begin to plan for. Sarah continued, here's what happens next. You sign a consignment agreement with Christie's. We arrange secure transport of the entire collection to our New York vault. That means armed guards, insurance for full estimated value, climate-controlled transportation. In New York, our gemology team will spend 3 to 4 months examining every stone, creating detailed catalog descriptions, photographing everything professionally. Meanwhile, our marketing team will prepare materials for collectors worldwide. We'll schedule the auction for next spring, probably May or June, when major collectors are most active. What about expenses? Transport, insurance, all of that? Christie's covers all expenses. We take a commission on the final sale price, typically 10 to 12% for collections this size. You pay capital gains tax on the proceeds. Your accountant will handle that. But Ms. Ruiz, even after commissions and taxes, you're looking at clearing $250 to $300 million minimum. Potentially much more, depending on final sale results. $250 million. After taxes, after fees, after everything. Still more money than Elena had words for. What I need to do? Sarah pulled contracts from her briefcase. Sign here. Initial here. This gives Christie's exclusive right to represent the collection for auction. You retain ownership until sale. We can't touch the stones without your permission. But once you sign, we begin the authentication and marketing process. Elena read the contract carefully despite knowing she'd sign regardless. The terms were clear. Christie's took 12% commission, covered all expenses, insured the collection for $400 million during transport and authentication, and guaranteed the auction would happen within 12 months. She signed. Her hand shook, but the signature was legible. James began carefully packing the 15 sample stones into a specialized case that looked like it could survive a nuclear blast. Sarah made calls on her phone, arranging transport for tomorrow, scheduling gemologists in New York, setting machinery in motion. By 2 p.m., everything was arranged. A team would arrive tomorrow at 8 a.m. with an armored truck and 4 armed guards. They'd collect all 247 boxes, transport them to Phoenix Airport, fly them to New York on a private plane, and deliver them to Christie's vault before sunset. Sarah shook Elena's hand with genuine warmth. Ms. Ruiz, congratulations. Your life just changed. I'll be in touch constantly as we move through authentication. Expect media attention once we announce the auction. This is too significant to keep quiet. You should probably hire a lawyer and an accountant immediately. People will come out of the woodwork wanting a piece of this. After they left, Elena sat alone in the conference room with Mia. Her daughter looked up from her coloring book with 8-year-old wisdom. Mama, are we rich now? Elena pulled Mia into her lap and held her tight. Yeah, baby. We're rich now. We're really, really rich. For the first time in 8 years, maybe in her entire life, Elena let herself cry. Not from fear or exhaustion or defeat, but from relief so profound it felt like being born. 3 generations of Ruiz men had carried this burden in silence and fear. 3 generations of poverty because courage failed, but Elena had found the cabinet, opened it, claimed what was hers, and transformed inheritance into salvation. The stones are going to New York. In 6 months, they go to auction. And when the hammer fell on the final lot, Elena Ruiz would walk away with enough money to ensure Mia never knew poverty, never feared eviction, never learned that hunger was normal. That night, they slept in the house that had been Elena's childhood prison and was now, briefly, a vault guarding a fortune. Tomorrow the stones would leave. The cabinet would empty. The secret would spread. But tonight, Elena let herself imagine the future. A real house with a backyard, college paid for, medical care without bankruptcy, the ability to help others the way no one had ever helped her. Her father's letter sat on the nightstand. She read it one more time before sleep. Be brave. Use it. Give Mia what I couldn't give you. She had. She would. $300 million. Maybe more. Maybe $500 million if the auction went well. Enough to rewrite history. Enough to break cycles. Enough to prove that sometimes, rarely, miraculously, poverty's grip could be broken by ordinary people brave enough to open locked doors and claim what was rightfully theirs. Elena closed her eyes and slept peacefully for the first time in years. The armored truck arrived at 7:53 a.m., 7 minutes early, rumbling down the residential street like a military invasion. Neighbors emerged onto porches, curious and suspicious, watching 4 armed guards in tactical gear exit the vehicle and approach Elena's father's house. Elena had been awake since 5, cataloging every box one final time, creating her own inventory to match against Christie's eventual documentation. 247 boxes, each one photographed, each label recorded, each stone accounted for in the ledger her grandfather had started and her father had maintained. The head guard introduced himself as Marcus Cole, no relation to her ex-husband, thank God, and presented credentials that looked official enough. Behind him, a woman in a Christie's polo shirt carried specialized equipment cases. Ms. Ruiz, I'm Cassandra from Christie's logistics team. We'll be inventorying every piece as we pack it, creating a digital record that both you and Christie's will have access to. This process takes about 3 hours. Are you comfortable with that timeline? Elena nodded, throat too tight for words. Mia pressed against her side, watching the strangers invade their temporary home with wide eyes. The packing happened with military precision. Each box was opened, photographed, cataloged into a tablet, then placed in foam-lined cases that looked capable of surviving a plane crash. Cassandra worked methodically, calling out descriptions while a second Christie's employee verified against the documentation Elena had provided. GRD 47V, diamond, round, brilliant, approximately 2.1 carats, clarity appears VS1, color appears GH range. Confirmed. SAP 92, VS2, sapphire, oval cut, approximately 8.7 carats. Salon origin, based on color saturation, cornflower blue. Confirmed. RBY 18, AA, ruby, cushion cut, approximately 4.3 carats. Burmese characteristics, pigeon's blood color. Confirmed. On and on for 3 hours. Elena's inheritance transformed from mysterious boxes in a basement cabinet into line items in a database, each one assigned a value that would be refined through months of analysis. Around 10:30 a.m., the cabinet stood empty for the first time in 37 years. The interior looked smaller without its treasure, just black velvet and metal shadows and the ghost of 3 generations' hopes. Marcus Cole supervised loading the cases into the armored truck while the other guards maintained perimeter security. The whole operation felt like something from a movie, too dramatic for real life, too professional for someone like Elena who'd spent her entire existence invisible to systems built for wealthy people. Cassandra handed Elena a tablet. Sign here confirming we've taken possession of 247 boxes containing gemstones matching the descriptions in your documentation. Christie's now assumes full liability and insurance coverage valued at $400 million during transport and authentication. Elena signed with hands that had finally stopped shaking. $400 million in insurance. The number had become abstract, too large to feel real, existing in some alternate dimension where Elena Ruiz owned things worth protecting with armed guards and private planes. The truck pulled away at 11:07 a.m. Elena and Mia stood on the porch watching it disappear around the corner, carrying everything that mattered compressed into foam cases and digital records. "Mama, what do we do now?" The question deserved better than Elena's honest answer. "I have no idea, baby." Her phone rang. Sarah Chun calling for New York. "Ms. Ruiz, we've received confirmation that transport is en route. The collection should arrive at our vault by 7 p.m. Eastern. I wanted to discuss next steps." "Okay. First, you need legal representation immediately. Not just any lawyer. You need someone who specializes in high net worth estate planning and tax law. Christie's can provide referrals if needed. Second, you need a financial advisor who handles ultra high net worth clients. We're talking about managing potentially $300 million in liquid assets once the auction concludes. That requires expertise you probably don't have. Ultra high net worth. The phrase sounded like science fiction. I don't know any lawyers like that. I don't know any financial advisors, period. Sarah's voice softened slightly. "I understand. This is overwhelming. Let me send you names of 3 law firms and 2 financial advisory groups that Christie's has worked with successfully. All of them have experience with sudden wealth situations, lottery winners, inheritance cases like yours, athletes with big contracts. They understand you're not starting from a position of financial literacy, and they won't condescend. But Ms. Ruiz, you need to hire them this week. Once we announce the auction publicly, you'll become a target for every scammer, long-lost relative, and opportunist within 100 miles. The warning landed cold in Elena's stomach. When does the announcement happen? We typically announce major auctions about 6 months before the sale date. That gives us time to build anticipation and market to serious collectors worldwide. But for collections this significant, we sometimes issue a preliminary announcement earlier. I'd like to release a press statement in 2 weeks, just basic information about an important gemstone collection coming to auction. No names mentioned yet. That give you time to get legal protection in place. 2 weeks. 14 days of anonymity, before her life became public property. What should I do in the meantime? Get the legal and financial teams in place. Start thinking about what you want your life to look like after this sale. And Ms. Ruiz, be very, very careful who you trust. Money this size changes people. Friends become opportunists. Family members you haven't heard from in years will suddenly remember you exist. Trust no one until your lawyers vet them. The call ended. Elena stood in her father's empty house, feeling more alone than she had living in a storage unit. At least poverty was familiar. Poverty made sense. She knew how to navigate food stamps and eviction notices and juggling bills. But this, wealth managers and estate planning and protecting herself from people who'd want pieces of her fortune, she had no roadmap for that. Mia tugged her sleeve. Mama, I'm hungry. The mundane request grounded Elena in reality. Whatever else changed, her daughter still needed lunch. She still needed to be a mother. Money didn't alter basic responsibilities. They went to the grocery store, a real one, not the discount market where expired food got sold at markdowns. Elena filled the cart without checking prices. Fruit that wasn't bruised. Meat that wasn't on clearance. Bread from the bakery section instead of day-old discount. The total came to $247.89. Her account showed $284.53 remaining. In the old life, that would have triggered panic. Not enough to last until a paycheck that wasn't coming. But Sarah's email had included a small detail Elena had almost missed. Christie's would advance $50,000 within a week against the eventual sale to help with immediate expenses and legal fees. $50,000. More than Elena had earned in the past 2 years combined, coming in 7 days just to cover immediate expenses. She paid for the groceries and felt the strange disconnect of spending money she didn't quite have yet while knowing that soon, very soon, she'd have more than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. Back at the house, Elena's phone showed missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. She'd learned early in life that unknown numbers meant collection agencies or scammers, so she let them go to voicemail. But curiosity won. She played the first message. Elena, this is your cousin Miguel. Haven't talked in a while, but I heard about Uncle Rafael passing. Been thinking about family lately. Give me a call when you can. Miguel. She hadn't heard from him in 8 years. Hadn't been invited to his wedding. Hadn't received Christmas cards or birthday wishes from Mia. Now suddenly he was thinking about family. The second message was worse. Ms. Ruiz, this is Trevor Hammond from Hammond Financial Services. I specialize in helping people who've recently come into money. I'd love to discuss investment opportunities that could maximize your returns. Please call at your earliest convenience. How'd he know? The collection wasn't public yet. Christie's hadn't announced anything. But somehow word was spreading. Whispers in banks, speculation in financial circles, information leaking despite Sarah's warnings about secrecy. Elena deleted both voicemails and turned off her phone. Sarah was right. Vultures were already circling. She opened Sarah's email with the legal and financial referrals. 3 law firms, all based in Phoenix, all with websites showing glass office towers and attorneys in expensive suits. She chose the one with a woman's name as managing partner, Rebecca Ortiz at Ortiz and Associates, figuring another Latina might understand the cultural complexity of sudden wealth in a family that had never had any. The receptionist who answered sounded surprised when Elena said she'd been referred by Christie's auction house. One moment, please. Let me see if Ms. Ortiz is available. Hold music played for exactly 40 seconds before a new voice came on. Confident, professional, warmly Hispanic in a way that immediately put Elena at ease. Ms. Ruiz, this is Rebecca Ortiz. Sarah Chin at Christie's sent me a heads up that you might be calling. I understand you've recently inherited some valuable assets? Yes. Gemstones. A lot of them. Christie's is handling the auction, but they said I need legal representation immediately. They're absolutely right. How soon can you come to my office? I'd like to review your situation and discuss protection strategies before word spreads further. Today? Tomorrow? How about in 2 hours? I'll clear my afternoon. This is important enough to prioritize. At 2 p.m., Elena and Mia entered an office tower in downtown Phoenix that smelled like success and climate control. The elevator rose to the 14th floor, where Ortiz and associates occupied a corner suite with views of the entire valley. Rebecca Ortiz herself met them in the reception area. 50-something, sharply dressed, radiating the kind of competence that came from decades of navigating complex legal situations. Her office was large, but not ostentatious, decorated with family photos that showed she understood the importance of legacy. Ms. Ruiz, thank you for coming so quickly. And this must be Mia? Mia nodded shyly. Rebecca offered her a tablet loaded with games and set her up in a conference room visible through glass walls before returning to her desk. Now, tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Elena explained it all. The cabinet, the combination, the letter from her father, the documentation, the Christie's verification, the transport to New York that morning. Rebecca listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad with the kind of attention that felt expensive. When Elena finished, Rebecca set down her pen and leaned forward. Okay, first, congratulations. What you've inherited is extraordinary. Second, you're smart to come here before the news breaks publicly. We need to build legal protection immediately. Third, I want to be very clear about my fees, so there's no confusion. I charge $650 per hour for estate planning and asset protection work. Based on the complexity of your situation, you're looking at maybe $50,000 to $75,000 in legal fees over the next year to properly structure everything. Are you comfortable with that? $50,000 for legal fees. A year ago, a week ago, the number would have been impossible. Now, it was a rounding error against the fortune she was about to receive. Yes, Christie's is advancing me $50,000 within the week. I can pay from that. Good. Here's what we're going to do immediately. We'll create an LLC to hold the proceeds from the auction. That provides liability protection and tax advantages. We'll also create a trust structure for long-term asset management. Probably a revocable living trust that you control, but that provides estate planning benefits. We'll draft a new will because you need to specify what happens to these assets if something happens to you. And we'll file for a restraining order against your ex-husband preemptively. Elena blinked. Marcus? Why? Rebecca's expression was knowing. Because the moment he learns you have money, he'll file for custody modification, claiming he can provide better for Mia than you can. Judges are supposed to ignore wealth when determining best interests of the child, but reality is messy. We need to establish on record that his sudden interest in custody perfectly correlates with your financial change. That protects Mia and protects you. The strategy was aggressive, but made sense. Marcus had ignored his daughter for 6 years, contributed almost nothing, then suddenly cared when his new wife wanted a child. If he learned Elena was about to receive $300 million, his custody petition would intensify into something far more dangerous. How do we keep him from finding out? We can't completely. Once Christie's makes a public announcement, reporters will identify you. Your name will hit the news. But we can delay that and build legal defenses before it happens. Meanwhile, you need to be extremely careful about social media, about what you tell people, about any public behavior that could be used against you in custody proceedings. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Elena signed retainer agreements, provided documentation, authorized Rebecca to begin building the legal structures that would protect the fortune she didn't quite have yet. When they finally left, Elena's head was spinning with terminology she barely understood. Irrevocable trusts, estate tax exemptions, gift tax strategies, charitable remainder trusts, family limited partnerships. The vocabulary of wealth that she'd never needed before. Mia had fallen asleep in the conference room, exhausted by a day that had started with armed guards and ended with lawyers. Elena carried her to the car, buckled her in, and sat in the parking garage, trying to process everything that had happened in the past 72 hours. 3 days ago, she'd had $487 and an eviction notice. Now she had legal representation that cost $650 per hour, $50,000 coming from Christie's within a week, and the certainty that in 6 months she'd auction gemstones worth hundreds of millions. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Elena, it's Marcus. We need to talk about Mia's living situation. Call me. The message was polite, carefully worded, nothing overtly threatening. But Rebecca's warning echoed in Elena's mind. His sudden interest in custody wasn't coincidence. She didn't respond. Let him wonder. Let him wait. She had lawyers now, had protection, had resources he couldn't match. The $50,000 advance from Christie's hit Elena's account 6 days later with an email from their accounting department. Advance against consignment proceeds will be deducted from final auction settlement. Elena stared at her phone, showing a balance of $50,284. 53. More money than she'd ever had in her life. Enough to pay Rebecca's retainer, buy Mia new everything, rent a decent apartment while they waited for the auction. But first, she needed to deal with Marcus. His custody petition arrived via process server 2 days after the Christie's advance. Elena read it standing in her father's driveway while the server waited for her signature confirming receipt. The petition claimed Elena was financially unstable, had subjected Mia to housing insecurity, and that Marcus could provide a stable 2-parent household with educational resources and emotional support the child currently lacks. Every word was technically true based on the past 3 months. But the timing, filing exactly when Elena's situation was improving, revealed the petition's real motivation. Rebecca reviewed the documents that afternoon in her office. This is weak. Courts care about stability, but they also care about parental involvement. Marcus abandoned Mia for 6 years, contributed almost nothing financially, and now suddenly wants custody when it's convenient for his new marriage. We'll fight this aggressively. What if he finds out about the auction? Then we emphasize that your financial situation has dramatically improved, that you have resources to provide everything Mia needs, and that his petition is transparently opportunistic. Judges aren't stupid. They can see through custody grabs motivated by money. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out, early September. By then, Christie's would likely have made their public announcement. Elena's name would be attached to the largest gemstone auction in modern history. Marcus would know. Everyone would know. Rebecca filed a counter-motion challenging Marcus's standing, documenting his years of neglect, and requesting the judge consider the suspicious timing of his sudden parental interest. Meanwhile, life continued in strange duality. Elena rented a 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood. $1, $800 per month that would have been impossible a week ago, but now felt trivial. She enrolled Mia in a good school with art programs and small class sizes. She bought a reliable used car to replace the dying Civic. Each expense came from the $50,000 advance, each one making Elena nervous despite knowing hundreds of millions were coming. Poverty had trained her that money disappeared faster than it arrived, that security was temporary, that something would always go wrong. But nothing went wrong. Christie's sent weekly updates, authentication proceeding on schedule. Initial gemological reports confirm quality exceeds estimates. Marketing materials in development. Auction date tentatively set for May 15th. May 15th, 7 months away. 7 months of waiting, wondering, hoping the dream didn't evaporate. The public announcement came in late September, exactly as Sarah had predicted. Christie's issued a press release. Important gemstone collection to anchor spring 2025 Magnificent Jewels auction. Collection includes rare colored stones and exceptional diamonds with provenance dating to 1940s to 1950s. Estimated value $350 to $450 million. Consigned from a private American collection. No names mentioned. No specific details. Just enough information to generate interest in collector communities worldwide. Within hours, gemology forums were speculating. Within days, industry publications were reaching out to Christie's for more information. Within a week, mainstream media picked up the story. Mysterious gemstone collection could break auction records. Elena watched the coverage from her new apartment with a mix of pride and terror. Her inheritance was becoming news. Soon reporters would identify her. Soon privacy would evaporate. Rebecca called with updates. We've had 3 media inquiries asking if you're the consigner. I've declined to comment. But Elena, It's only a matter of time. Phoenix is a small world in some circles. Someone will connect the dots between Christie's announcement and the fact that Rafael Ruiz died, recently leaving an estate to his daughter. What do I do when they figure it out? Nothing. You don't owe anyone explanations. If reporters contact you directly, refer them to me. Don't give interviews. Don't confirm or deny. Don't engage. Let Christie's handle media relations until after the auction. Your job is to stay quiet and let the process unfold. Staying quiet proved harder than expected. Cousin Miguel called again, more persistent this time. Elena, people are saying you inherited something valuable. Family should help family. We should talk. She didn't call back. Her ex-supervisor from the restaurant where she'd worked called. Hey, Elena, heard you came into some money. Been thinking about that business loan you can invest in. Real opportunity here. She blocked the number. A woman claiming to be her father's half-sister from his first marriage called. I never got to know Rafael, but I'd love to connect with you and Mia. Family is important, you know? Delete. The attention was exhausting and invasive and exactly what Rebecca had warned about. People emerged from nowhere, claiming connection, demanding consideration, all of them circling wealth they thought they deserved pieces of. Marcus's attorney filed an amended custody petition in October. New information suggests Ms. Ruiz may have recently received substantial assets. Petitioner requests full financial disclosure to determine child support modification and ensure proper provisioning for the minor child. Rebecca laughed when she read it. He's fishing, trying to force you to reveal your financial situation. We'll oppose the disclosure request. Your assets are none of his business unless they directly impact Mia's welfare. And since you're clearly providing excellent care, there's no ground for forced disclosure. The custody hearing happened on October 23rd in a Maricopa County courtroom that smelled like old carpet and institutional cleaning supplies. Marcus arrived with his attorney, a young guy in a discount suit who looked nervous. Marcus himself had gained weight, lost hair, and carried the soft dissatisfaction of someone whose life hadn't matched his expectations. He didn't look at Elena, didn't acknowledge Mia sitting quietly beside Rebecca in the gallery, just stared straight ahead while his attorney presented arguments about stability and two-parent households and educational opportunities. Rebecca dismantled him methodically. She presented bank records showing Marcus had contributed exactly $400 in child support over 6 years, roughly $5.50 per month. She showed text messages where he'd ignored Elena's request for help with medical expenses. She highlighted the correlation between his custody petition and rumors about Elena's inheritance. The judge, a woman in her 60s with the exhausted expression of someone who'd seen every custody trick imaginable, listened with obvious skepticism. When Rebecca finished, the judge addressed Marcus directly. Mr. Cross, you've contributed almost nothing to your daughter's care for 6 years. You filed for custody modification exactly when rumors suggested Ms. Ruiz's financial situation improved. Can you explain why I should believe this petition is motivated by your daughter's best interests rather than your own financial interests? Marcus stammered something about wanting to be more involved, about his wife providing a stable home, about concern for Mia's welfare. The judge cut him off. Petition denied. Ms. Ruiz retains full physical and legal custody. Mr. Cross, if you want to be involved in your daughter's life, I suggest starting with consistent child support and regular visitation. This court is not a tool for financial opportunism. We're adjourned. The gavel came down. Marcus's attorney looked defeated. Marcus himself looked furious. Outside the courtroom, Rebecca squeezed Elena's shoulder. That's done. He can appeal, but he won't win. You're safe. Elena felt the victory settle into her bones. Safe. Mia was safe. The custody threat was neutralized. One major obstacle cleared. Winter passed in strange suspension. Elena and Mia lived in their nice apartment, attended good schools, bought things without checking prices first. The $50,000 advance dwindled to $28,000 by December, but Christie sent another email. Additional advance of $100,000 approved, given strong preliminary interest from collectors. Total advances will be deducted from final proceeds. $100,000 arrived 3 days before Christmas. Elena bought Mia everything she'd ever wanted. Art supplies, books, a bicycle, clothes that fit, a bedroom set that wasn't secondhand. They donated to the shelter where they'd spent 2 nights the previous winter. They bought groceries for families Elena knew were struggling the way she'd struggled just months before. On Christmas morning, Mia opened presents in their warm apartment with food in the refrigerator and no fear of eviction. And Elena felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope that the future could be different than the past. Christie sent progress reports throughout winter. Gemological analysis complete. All stones authenticated. Several pieces exceed initial estimates. Star ruby appraised at $18. $5 million. Large diamond appraised at $12. $3 million. Total conservative estimate revised upward to $425 million. $425 million. The number had grown. Elena tried to feel excited, but mostly felt numb. The amounts were too large to process emotionally. Rebecca worked on tax strategy. You'll owe approximately 40% between federal and state capital gains. That's $170 million in taxes on a $425 million sale, leaving you with approximately $255 million after taxes and Christie's commission. I know that sounds like a lot to lose, but trust me, $255 million is still life-changing money. $255 million. After everything. Still more than Elena could spend in 5 lifetimes. The auction catalog arrived in March. A beautiful, glossy publication showing every lot professionally photographed against black velvet. Elena's stones looked like stars captured in print. Each piece described in detail that made them sound like artifact from mythology rather than things her grandfather had carried in a leather pouch through Colombian mountains 70 years ago. Lot 147, Star Ruby 47, 3 carats, Burmese origin, exceptional asterism, pigeon's blood color. Estimate, $15 million to $20 million. Lot 203, Diamond 8, 1 carats, type IIA, D color, internally flawless. Estimate, $10 million to $14 million. Lot 388, Sapphire, Cashmere origin, 15, 2 carats, cornflower blue, no heat treatment detected. Estimate, $12 million to $16 million. On and on for 247 lots. Each one representing a piece of her inheritance. Each one about to be sold to the highest bidder. Sarah called in April. We're seeing extraordinary pre-auction interest. Several lots already have phone bidders registered willing to go above estimate. The Star Ruby has 3 collectors competing before the sale even starts. Elena, I think we're going to exceed $450 million total. Possibly approach $500 million if bidding gets competitive. $500 million. $500 million. The number had become absurd. When will I know for sure? Auction is May 15th. Results will be final within 24 hours. Settlement typically takes 30 to 45 days after auction for payment processing and fund transfers. So you're looking at receiving proceeds in late June or early July. 3 months. 90 days until the waiting ended and theoretical wealth became actual money in accounts Elena controlled. The night before the auction, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in her comfortable bed in her safe apartment, listening to Mia breathe softly in the next room and try to process everything that had changed in 10 months. 10 months ago, she'd had $487 and an eviction notice. She'd been living in a storage unit, bathing in gas stations, letting her daughter sleep on a camping mat between boxes of everything they owned. Now she had legal representation, financial advisors, a custody victory, and tomorrow her inheritance would sell at Christie's for hundreds of millions of dollars. Her father's letter sat in the nightstand drawer. She pulled it out and read it one more time. Be brave. Use it. Give me what I couldn't give you. She had been brave, had opened the cabinet, claimed the stones, fought for legal protection, protected her daughter, refused to let fear or poverty's learned helplessness stop her from accepting the gift 3 generations had preserved. Tomorrow would prove whether that bravery mattered. The auction happened in New York at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Phoenix time. Elena watched via live stream on her laptop with Mia beside her, both of them nervous and excited and terrified in equal measure. The Christie's auction room was elegant, wood paneling, chandeliers, rows of seats filled with wealthy collectors and dealers. The auctioneer was a British woman with a crisp accent who made bidding sound like poetry. Lot 147. Star Ruby, 47. 3 carats, Burmese origin. Opening bid, $12 million. Paddles went up immediately. Phone bidders competed. The price climbed in million-dollar increments. $14 million. $15 million. $16 million on the phone. $17 million in the room. $18 million on my right. Elena's hands gripped the laptop edge. $18 million. For 1 stone. Her grandfather had carried that ruby in his pocket through dangerous territory, and now strangers were bidding amounts that could fund small countries. $19 million. $20 million. New bidder online. $21 million. The bidding slowed. 2 bidders remaining, each determined. The auctioneer's voice carried practiced excitement. $22 million on the phone. Last call. Fair warning. Selling at $22 million. The gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the speakers. Sold for $22 million. Mia grabbed Elena's hand. Mama, that's so much money. I know, baby. I know. Lot after lot sold. Some exceeded estimates dramatically. Some sold at the low end. But everything sold. Every single stone found a buyer. The large diamond went for $14. $2 million. The cashmere sapphire brought $17. $8 million. A collection of emeralds sold as 1 lot for $23. $5 million. Elena stopped tracking individual prices after the first hour. The numbers were too large, too fast, too overwhelming. She just watched the gavel fall again and again, transforming her grandfather's collection into the largest gemstone auction in Christie's history. By 9 p.m. Eastern, it was over. The auctioneer thanked everyone for participating and announced preliminary results would be available within the hour. Elena closed the laptop and sat in silence. Mia had fallen asleep against her shoulder, exhausted by hours of watching strangers bid millions for rocks that had lived in their basement. The email from Sarah came at 9:47 p.m. Eastern, 6:47 p.m. Phoenix time. Elena, congratulations. Total hammer price, $512,750,000. After Christie's commission, 12%, and estimated taxes, 40%, your net proceeds will be approximately $271,440,000. Official settlement in 35 to 40 days. You did it. Your grandfather and father would be so proud. Elena read the number 3 times. $271,440,000. $271 million. After everything. After taxes and fees and commissions. Still more money than existed in Elena's understanding of reality. She woke Mia gently. Baby, it's done. The auction finished. Mia rubbed her eyes. Do we get rich? Elena laughed. Actually laughed for the first time in months. Yeah, baby. We got really, really rich. The settlement took exactly 38 days. On June 24th, Elena's phone pinged with a notification from her bank. Wire transfer received. $271,440,000. 00 She stared at the screen, showing a balance that didn't fit. Couldn't fit. Couldn't be real. But it was real. The money existed. The auction had happened. The dream had become actual wealth in an account she controlled. Rebecca had already established the LLC and trust structures. The money was immediately distributed into investment accounts managed by the financial advisory team Elena had hired in January. Diversified portfolios, tax-advantage strategies, charitable foundations, everything designed to preserve wealth and generate sustainable income for generations. Elena would receive approximately $10 million per year to live on. More money than she could spend, but still just a fraction of the total. allowing the principal to grow and provide for Mia's children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Her father's cowardice had almost buried this wealth forever. His father's fear had kept it hidden for decades. But Elena's courage had transformed inheritance into legacy that would outlive everyone currently alive. She bought a house, not a mansion, but a comfortable 4-bedroom in a good neighborhood with a backyard where Mia could play. She established a college fund that would cover Ivy League tuition without touching the principal. She donated $5 million to homeless shelters across Phoenix. She created a foundation to help single mothers escape poverty through education and job training. And she kept her father's letter in a frame on her desk, next to a photo of the cabinet that had held salvation for 70 years. Marcus tried contacting her once after the news broke about the auction. His voicemail was polite, congratulatory, suggesting they should reconnect for Mia's sake. Elena deleted it without responding. He'd had 6 years to be a father. Money didn't buy him back into Mia's life. The media attention lasted about 6 weeks. Reporters calling, interview requests, feature stories about the single mother who inherited a fortune. Rebecca handled all of it, declining everything, protecting Elena's privacy while the frenzy burned itself out. Eventually, the story faded. Other news replaced it. Elena became just another wealthy woman in a city full of wealthy people. Invisible again, but this time by choice. A year after opening the cabinet, Elena sat in her backyard watching Mia play with their new dog, a golden retriever puppy that Mia had named Ruby after the star Ruby that sold for $22 million. The evening was warm, monsoon storms building on the horizon, air thick with the promise of rain. Mia's laughter carried across the grass, bright and unworried, the sound of a child who'd never know poverty. Elena's phone buzzed. Email from Christie's. Thank you for allowing us to represent your extraordinary collection. The May 2025 Magnificent Jewels auction set records that will stand for decades. We hope you're enjoying your new life. She was enjoying it, not because of the money, though security mattered, but because of what the money represented. 3 generations of Ruiz men had carried the burden of those stones in silence and fear. Her grandfather had died protecting them. Her father had died regretting he'd never used them. But Elena had been brave enough to open the locked door, claim what was hers, and transform inheritance into freedom. That bravery mattered more than any dollar amount. Mia ran over, puppy tumbling after her. "Mama, can we get ice cream after dinner?" The question was so normal, so beautifully ordinary, that Elena wanted to cry. "Yeah, baby. We can get ice cream. We can get anything you want." Because they could. Because poverty's grip had finally, permanently broken. Because one locked cabinet and one brave decision had rewritten their family's entire future. The rain came as darkness fell, washing Phoenix clean, and Elena sat on her covered porch listening to thunder roll across the valley while her daughter slept safe and warm in a house they owned, with a future they controlled, and a legacy that would outlive them both. Her father's last words echoed in memory. "You're stronger than I ever was. You'll know what to do." She had known, had done it, had transformed fear into action and potential into reality. The stones were gone, sold to collectors worldwide, scattered across museums and private vaults and jewelry that would outlast everyone alive today. But what they'd purchased, freedom, security, hope, remained. And that inheritance, the real inheritance, would pass to Mia and beyond, proving that sometimes courage was the most valuable gemstone of all. 5 years after the auction, Elena Ruiz stood in the conference room of the Ruiz Foundation headquarters, a modern building in downtown Phoenix, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city she'd once navigated as an invisible poor person. Now she was here by choice, by design, running an organization that had helped over 2,300 single mothers escape poverty through education, job training, and direct financial assistance. The foundation's annual report sat on the table before her. Glossy pages showing statistics that represented real lives changed. 847 women graduated from vocational programs. 412 obtained professional certifications. 1,240 children moved from food insecurity to stable housing. Numbers that had once described Elena's own desperation now described people she had the power to help. Ms. Ruiz, the board is ready for you. Elena nodded to her assistant, a young woman named Sophia, who'd been one of the foundation's first scholarship recipients and now managed operations with the fierce competence of someone who understood what was at stake. They walked together down the hall where photographs lined the walls. Women who'd rebuilt their lives with foundation support. Children who'd graduated college. Families standing in front of homes they owned. The boardroom held 12 people. Financial advisors, nonprofit experts, community leaders, and Rebecca Ortiz, who transitioned from Elena's personal attorney to the foundation's legal counsel. They stood when Elena entered, a gesture of respect she still found uncomfortable despite 5 years of wealth. Please sit. Let's get started. The meeting covered expansion plans for the coming year. The foundation's endowment had grown to $85 million through careful investment of Elena's initial $25 million donation, plus returns that compounded annually. They were discussing opening satellite offices in Tucson and Flagstaff, expanding services to rural areas where poverty was invisible but devastating. The Tucson location would require approximately $3 million in startup costs, the CFO explained, pulling up spreadsheets. Staffing, lease, program development, initial operational expenses for 18 months until we achieve sustainability. Elena reviewed the numbers with the financial literacy she'd developed through necessity and education. 5 years ago, she couldn't have read a balance sheet. Now she understood ROI, overhead ratios, program efficacy metrics, all the vocabulary of intelligent philanthropy. Approved. Let's move forward with Tucson. What about the scholarship program expansion? The education director, a former teacher named Marcus, no relation to her ex-husband, thank God, presented data on their college scholarship program. We currently support 340 students at various universities. Graduation rate is 87%, significantly above the national average for first-generation college students. We're requesting budget increase to support 500 students next academic year. How much? Additional $4. $2 million annually. Elena didn't hesitate. Approved. Education changes everything. I want every qualified applicant accepted. The meeting continued for 2 hours, covering domestic violence support programs, emergency housing assistance, job placement services, childcare subsidies. Every program addressing some aspect of poverty Elena had experienced personally, now scaled to help thousands. When it ended, Rebecca walked with Elena to her office, a space deliberately modest despite the foundation's resources. Desk, chairs, bookshelves, photos of Mia at various ages. Nothing ostentatious. Nothing that would make the women seeking help feel the wealth gap between them and the person trying to assist. You're doing good work here, Rebecca said, settling into the visitor's chair. Your father and grandfather would be proud. Elena looked at the framed letter on her desk, her father's confession and blessing, preserved behind glass. I think about them constantly, about how close this all came to never happening. If I hadn't opened that cabinet, if I'd been too afraid like they were, all of this, she gestured to the office, the foundation, everything, would still be locked in a basement somewhere. But you weren't too afraid. That's what matters. They discussed legal matters, tax strategies, grant compliance, nonprofit regulations. Then Rebecca pulled out a different folder, expression shifting to something more serious. I need to tell you about Marcus. Your ex-husband Marcus. Elena's stomach tightened. She hadn't heard his name in years, not since the custody hearing where the judge had eviscerated his opportunistic petition. What about him? He's filed for bankruptcy. Lost his job 18 months ago. His wife left him. He's living with his mother and apparently struggling significantly. Rebecca paused. He reached out to my office asking if you consider helping him financially. Not as charity, but as a loan he swears he'd repay. The audacity was almost impressive. 6 years of neglect, a custody grab motivated by greed, then silence for 5 years, and now he wanted money. Elena laughed without humor. What did you tell him? That I'd relay the message, but couldn't promise anything. Elena, legally you owe him nothing. Morally, I'd argue the same. But I wanted you to know he's reached out. Elena thought about Mia, now 13, thriving in private school, excelling in art and debate, completely unburdened by memories of her father's abandonment because she'd been so young when he left. Mia knew Marcus existed, but felt no connection to him beyond biological fact. Tell him no, not out of cruelty, but because giving him money teaches the wrong lesson. He chose not to be a father when it was hard. He doesn't get to benefit from my success now that it's convenient. If he's genuinely struggling, he can apply for assistance through the Foundation's general programs like anyone else. But he gets no special consideration. Rebecca, not at approval. I'll communicate that. He won't like it. He doesn't have to like it. He just has to accept it. After Rebecca left, Elena sat alone in her office watching Phoenix afternoon light paint shadows across the floor. Marcus's request had stirred something uncomfortable. Not guilt, exactly, but awareness of the vast gulf between her life and his. 5 years ago, they'd both been struggling. She'd had marginally less than him. He at least had a job and housing. But they'd occupied the same economic territory where one emergency could trigger catastrophe. Now she had $240 million in assets after foundation donations and living expenses, while he was bankrupt and desperate. Wealth had lifted her. Its absence had crushed him. And while his own choices had contributed to his situation, Elena recognized how much luck and inheritance had shaped hers. She thought about her grandfather, Antonio, carrying gemstones through Colombian mountains, about her father, Rafael, too afraid to sell them, about the locked cabinet that had waited 70 years for someone brave enough to claim its contents. The line between Marcus's poverty and her wealth was thinner than comfortable. One combination lock, one decision, one moment of courage. But she'd made that decision, and he'd made his. Consequences followed choices. She wouldn't rescue him from his own failures. Elena's phone buzzed. Text from Mia. Mom, can Jasmine sleep over Friday? Please? We have a project due Monday, and she's my partner. The normalcy of the request made Elena smile. 13-year-old concerns about sleepovers and school projects. Mia's childhood bore no resemblance to Elena's own. No evictions, no hunger, no fear. Just ordinary teenage life in a stable home with resources that made problems solvable rather than catastrophic. She texted back, yes, but you're both working on the project, not just watching videos all night. 3 dots appeared, then, Obvi Mom. We're not 10 anymore. We're mature. Followed by enough eye-roll emojis to make Elena laugh. Mature. 13, and certain she understood the world. Elena remembered that feeling, though her 13-year-old maturity had come from managing household bills while her father drank and learning which churches gave out food on which days. Mia's maturity came from debate tournaments and art competitions and the confidence of a child who'd never doubted she was loved and secure. That difference, that generational transformation, justified every moment of fear Elena had experienced opening the cabinet and claiming her inheritance. That evening, Elena drove to the cemetery where her father was buried. She visited monthly, maintaining the grave, talking to stone that couldn't answer but somehow still felt present. Rafael Ruiz's headstone was modest granite with simple inscription, Beloved Father and Grandfather. 1952 to 2024. He gave more than he knew. Elena set fresh flowers in a vase and sat on the grass beside the grave. The cemetery was quiet, evenings settling into dusk. Other visitors leaving as darkness approached. Hey, Papa. Brought you update on the foundation. We're expanding to Tucson. Helped another 230 families this quarter. The scholarship program is up to 340 students, 500 next year if we hit our targets. She paused, imagining his response. Pride mixed with regret that he hadn't lived to see what his locked cabinet had enabled. Marcus asked for money. Can you believe it? After everything, he wants a loan. I said no. I think you'd approve of that decision. Some people need to face consequences of their choices. A breeze moved through the cemetery, rustling leaves in nearby trees. Elena pulled her jacket tighter. Mia's doing great. Straight A's. Though she's constantly arguing with me about phone privileges and whether 13 is old enough to wear makeup to school. Normal stuff. Good stuff. The kind of problems parents should have instead of worrying about rent and food. She stood, brushing grass from her jeans. I think about you and Abuelo Antonio all the time. How you both carried those stones in fear and silence. How close it all came to being lost forever. I'm trying to honor what you preserved by using it the way you couldn't. I hope that's enough. I hope you're proud. The stone offered no response, but Elena felt peace settling over her regardless. She'd done what her father asked in his letter. Been brave, used the inheritance, given Mia what 3 generations hadn't been able to give their children. That night, Mia and Elena cooked dinner together, a ritual they maintained even after wealth made hiring chefs possible. Tonight was pasta with homemade sauce, garlic bread, salad. Simple food that required collaboration and conversation. Mom, can I ask you something serious? Mia's tone shifted from teenage casual to genuinely curious. Always. Do you ever feel weird about being rich? Like we have so much and most people have so little. Does that bother you? The question was thoughtful and complicated in ways that revealed Mia's developing social consciousness. 13 and already grappling with wealth inequality in personal terms. Elena chose her words carefully. I feel weird about it constantly. I remember what it was like to be poor. Really poor, not budgeting carefully poor, but choosing between medicine and electricity poor. And now I have more money than I can spend in 10 lifetimes. That disconnect is strange and sometimes uncomfortable. So why keep it? Why not give it all away? Because giving it all away once helps people temporarily. Building sustainable programs that help people escape poverty permanently helps more people over time. The foundation does more good as an ongoing organization than I could do writing one giant check and depleting the resources. Mia absorbed this while grating Parmesan. What about Abuelo? You never talk about him much except to say he left you the stones. Elena hadn't shared the full story with Mia yet. The cowardice, the alcoholism, the wasted years sitting on a fortune while his family struggled. She'd edited the narrative into something simpler. Grandfather who was a courier, father who preserved what he inherited, daughter who finally sold it. But Mia was 13 now, old enough for complexity, old enough for truth. Your Abuelo was complicated. He loved me very much, but he was also afraid of everything. His own father left him a fortune in gemstones, and instead of using them to help our family, he kept them locked away because he was terrified of attention, of questions, of making mistakes. He worked a factory job and drank too much and watched us struggle with poverty when he could have changed everything. Mia's eyes widened. He had the stones the whole time, while you were poor. The whole time, 37 years, from when I was born until he died. Mia struggled for words. That's really sad, and kind of messed up. It was both. But Mia, I try not to judge him too harshly because I understand his fear. He was an immigrant who'd seen his father terrified of deportation. He didn't trust systems or authorities. He genuinely believed that revealing the stones would bring catastrophe down on our family. Fear is powerful. It makes people make choices that seem irrational to outsiders but feel necessary for survival. They worked in silence for a moment, Mia processing this more complicated version of her grandfather. Do you forgive him? The question hit Elena hard. Did she forgive Rafael for wasting decades? For letting her grow up poor when salvation sat locked in the basement? For dying before giving her the combination? Forcing her to find it accidentally years later? I forgive him because holding anger doesn't change the past, and because ultimately he did leave me the inheritance. His cowardice delayed it, but his planning preserved it. Without his meticulous documentation and careful storage, the stones might have been lost or stolen or degraded beyond value. So yes, I forgive him, and I'm grateful he was at least brave enough to leave me clues to find what he couldn't use himself. Dinner continued with lighter conversation. Mia's project, upcoming school events, weekend plans. But Elena noticed her daughter's thoughtfulness, the way she chewed slowly while processing the story of inherited cowardice and eventual courage. After Mia went to bed, Elena sat in her home office reviewing foundation finances. The numbers were good: sustainable growth, strong program outcomes, increasing impact. But her mind kept drifting to Marcus's bankruptcy and her father's wasted years and the strange lottery of life that elevated some people while crushing others for reasons that had nothing to do with merit or effort. She pulled up her personal investment portfolio on the computer screen. $240 million. The number barely changed her emotional state anymore. It was just data, abstract and enormous, and disconnected from the visceral reality of poverty she'd escaped. Elena opened a new browser tab and searched "Effective Altruism, Maximum Impact Philanthropy." The results led to articles about strategic giving, cost-benefit analysis of various interventions, debates about direct cash transfers versus systemic change. She spent 2 hours reading, taking notes, reconsidering the foundation's approach. Maybe they could do more. Maybe $85 million endowment was conservative when she had $240 million personally. Maybe the gap between what she was doing and what was possible was another form of cowardice, different from her father's, but still rooted in fear of giving too much, risking too much, changing too radically. By midnight, Elena had drafted an email to Rebecca and the foundation board. "I want to discuss significantly expanding our endowment and scope. Proposal: I donate an additional $100 million to the foundation over the next 2 years, increasing our capacity to serve 10x current numbers. This would require structural changes, additional staff, new programs, but would align our impact with our actual resources. Let's schedule a meeting to discuss feasibility." Elena, she read it 3 times before hitting send. $100 million. Nearly half her remaining personal wealth. Enough to transform the foundation from regional nonprofit to national organization, helping tens of thousands instead of thousands. Her father's voice echoed in memory. Be brave. This was brave. Not opening a cabinet. That had been necessity. This was choosing to give away wealth she could keep. Choosing impact over security. Choosing to honor the inheritance by using it the way it should have been used all along. The email sent at 12:47 a.m. Elena closed her laptop and went to check on Mia, a ritual she'd maintained since her daughter was born. 13 years old, and Mia still slept curled around a stuffed bear she'd had since age 3, one hand tucked under her pillow, peaceful and safe. Elena stood in the doorway watching her daughter breathe and felt the weight of generational responsibility settle over her like a mantle. Her grandfather had carried those stones in fear. Her father had hidden them in shame. Elena had claimed them in desperation. But Mia would inherit something different. Not gemstones or money, but the knowledge that wealth was responsibility, that fortune was obligation, that having more meant owing more to those with less. That inheritance, that understanding, mattered more than any dollar amount. Because money without conscience was just hoarding. But money deployed strategically could transform systems, break cycles, lift communities out of poverty that otherwise persisted for generations. Elena's phone buzzed. Email response from Rebecca despite the late hour. Are you sure about this? $100 million is significant. Let's talk before you commit. Elena typed back immediately. I'm sure. My father spent 37 years being afraid to use what he had. I won't make the same mistake. Let's meet this week. She climbed into bed, feeling the strange certainty that came from making difficult decisions for the right reasons. The foundation would expand. More families would be helped. The inheritance would fulfill its purpose not through being hoarded or spent on luxuries, but through systematic deployment against the poverty that had defined Elena's first 34 years. In the morning, Mia found her in the kitchen making pancakes. A weekend tradition they'd maintained despite wealth, making it possible to have chefs prepare every meal. Mom, you look tired. Were you up late? A little. Thinking about the foundation. I'm going to donate a lot more money to expand our programs. Mia poured orange juice with the casual competence of a teenager comfortable in her own home. How much more? $100 million over the next 2 years. Mia paused mid-pour. That's like a lot. It is. But we have it. And keeping it just to keep it doesn't help anyone. The foundation can use that money to help thousands of families escape poverty permanently. That seems more important than me having $240 million versus $140 million in the bank. Will we still be rich? The question made Elena smile. Yes, baby. We'll still be very rich. Just slightly less obscenely rich. You'll still go to any college you want. You'll still have everything you need. We'll be sharing more with people who need help. Mia nodded slowly, processing this the way she processed most information, thoughtfully, seriously, with the moral seriousness of someone raised to understand that privilege was responsibility. I think Abuelo would approve. I think so too. They ate pancakes together in comfortable silence, sunlight streaming through windows of a house they owned. In a life they'd built from courage and inheritance, and the understanding that locked doors only stayed locked until someone was brave enough to open them. Outside, Phoenix was waking up. Millions of people starting their days, some in poverty, some in comfort, most somewhere between. Elena's foundation would help hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands. Not enough to solve poverty entirely, but enough to prove that inherited wealth deployed intelligently could break cycles and create opportunities where none existed before. The cabinet was long gone, sold with her father's house after the auction. But its legacy lived on in programs and scholarships and families lifted from desperation into stability. That was the real treasure, not the stones themselves, but what they'd made possible. And Elena Ruiz, once invisible in her poverty, now quietly influential in her wealth, understood that the greatest inheritance she could leave Mia wasn't money at all. It was the courage to use it wisely. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.